Welcome to Surrendering to the Signs. I'm your host, Laura Gates. Today, I want to welcome Allison Sagraves to the podcast. Allison has been an executive coaching client of mine, and she has a very interesting path in that she's been in a very traditional corporate background, having graduated from Harvard, been a chief data officer, now being named as one of the top women in AI, advising startups in AI and developing programs to teach data officers. She's got an incredible resume. The reason I wanted to bring her onto the conversation is the journey she has had in terms of how she's navigated life from the corporate side to embrace nature, really, her love of nature, her love of spaces in nature, and how she's translated that into her life. Welcome, Allison. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here, Laura.
Can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes, I am, from a career standpoint right now, I'm running my own business. I do advising in data and AI. I work with companies around the world and help them with their data strategies and their AI strategies. I am on the faculty I'm an adjunct faculty at Carnegie Mellon in their Chief Data and AI Officer program, which is a really fantastic program. I've been with them I think we've had over 250 people go through their Chief Data Officer program, and now we've added the whole AI component. So I've met people from all over the world, and I have a really interesting client base. And only one of my clients is local. So I do business in different states, in different countries, all from my cabin in the woods.
I love that. And I think you were saying earlier that you were just featured in a magazine about that.
Yes, there was an article. The original title was going to be called Semi-Feral Women. And I think it ended up being called Women in the Wild in this month's Buffalo Spree. And it's about 4 women in Buffalo who bought land in different ways. I didn't know these other women. And it tells our story about what made us, how did we decide that we wanted to buy land, and it tells our different stories about what we've done with that, and really inspiring and very interesting. And we all did different things, but we have a lot of things in common that hopefully we'll get into.
Well, let's get into that. I'm fascinated. So when I first met you, you were in corporate America. You were trying to figure out what was next in your career. And you took a very different route than the traditional route of trying to figure out your next steps career-wise. So I'd just love to share that story because I find it fascinating and inspiring. And I think it all started with this desire for space.
Yes, it's interesting because I am somewhat of a claustrophobic person about time and about commitments and about physical space. And I like to have room. And I don't think we've ever actually talked about it in this way. I felt, in a sense, claustrophobic about my life. I felt that I didn't have space in my life for myself. I didn't have physical space. I didn't have mental space. And I had this sense that I needed more space. And that manifested itself into this idea of land. I just needed to kind of spread out. I wanted more freedom. I wanted to be more in touch with the cycles of nature. I felt like I went to work and it was dark. I got home and it was dark, and I wasn't in touch with the seasons. And that was very much a part of my childhood and very much like what my mother taught me. And she had just died a few years ago. So I think in a way, this was, in retrospect, a way I was processing grief, was feeling disconnected from just the very most elemental aspects of our existence and being connected to the earth.
So tell us a little bit about that journey from wanting space to now talking to us from a cabin and being featured in a magazine as a wild woman. What was that trajectory?
So I just had this idea, you know what? I'm just going to look at land. So I just started, and this was pre-COVID. So this was before people were crazy about real estate in a sense. So I just started looking at parcels of land. I really knew nothing about purchasing land. I didn't know anything about zoning. I didn't have a particular idea of what my outcome was. I just had this sense of wanting some physical space, wanting some land that maybe I could just take little hikes on, even if it was an acre, or I even looked at urban plots online. And I thought I'd kind of like to have more of a wild garden, and it was kind of a dreamy, ethereal concept. This was not a well thought out plan. But I looked at a few parcels of land, and it's possible to buy land in a lot of parts of this country, not for a lot of money if you are not looking in places that are the high rent districts. So I really encourage people to take a look in far-flung places. Don't look in the obvious places. And so my husband was totally supportive of this. We took a couple of little half-hour trips around Buffalo where we live and went north and we went south and of our metro area and looked at some parcels. And a friend of mine said, "Oh, you could just buy an Airstream and put it on the property and hang out." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, sounds cool." And so it was something that was an idea that I then turned into an active process where I actually was looking at actual land. I didn't look at a lot of parcels, but I started reading about zoning, and then I found out you actually can't just put an Airstream on land. That's actually more complicated. You can't just do these tiny houses. There's zoning laws. So then I started to see there's various impediments to actually executing on this sort of like fantasy that I had. And yet I was relentless in just looking. I was relentless. I mean, that is an aspect of me. I'm like a relentless person. And so one night, it was probably close to midnight on a Friday, I found this little cabin because I didn't want another house. I can't take care of my own house. I don't like taking care of homes. We can't fix stuff. We're not good property owners. So I didn't really want more responsibility. I just wanted space. Space, but no responsibility. So I found this little cabin that advertised itself as 600 square feet in the woods, like 40 minutes from my house. And I'm like, "Oh my God." So I contacted the person right away, and that was Friday night, and we were able to go see it Sunday. And I'm like, "This is perfect because I think I can handle 600 square feet. Like that's not a lot of space. This is pretty simple." And it didn't feel like a weight. I didn't want more. I didn't need to be more claustrophobic. I was looking for freedom. And so we saw it, and it was so charming, and it was in the woods. I'm like, "This is perfect." And so we just bought it. Like I decided then and there, my husband was there, we just bought it that day.
Can I insert something here? Because my recollection of the story is also that part of your exercise was trying to vision the future. And my recollection is that you would say to me, "All I can see, Laura, is a field of flowers in my mind's eye when I think about the future."
Yes, I did say that. At the time, I was really interested in native plants and flowers. Intellectually, not so much. I hadn't done anything about it, but I was becoming aware of this movement that's now much more prevalent, flower farms, and I would watch these flower designers like from the UK, and I just thought, "Oh, I would love to just spend more time with plants." And I had this like sort of idea of having a flower farm, although very impractical because it's super labor intensive, and talk about responsibility. It's good that I didn't do that. But yeah, so it was kind of a dreamlike state that I was in retrospect. And I did not have a so-called plan. I did not have this idea that, "Oh, if I get land, I'm going to do exactly this and this is what's going to happen." It was intuition. It was from the depths of my soul. It was like a yearning that came from a deep place, not from a headspace place and not from a business plan kind of place. It was a healing. I was looking for some kind of healing.
Not a rational place. That's fascinating. And my recollection is that you said, "Laura, you're not going to believe what's in the front of this house is this field of flowers."
Yes.
When you say I decided on the spot, I think for me, my understanding was like that was the deciding thing. There it is.
Yes. And because it was September and there were things blooming and it was very lush. I mean, we live in a very lush part of the country. And I just thought like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. It's Goldilocks. It's just right. It's not too much. It's not too little. I can handle this size bed.
Wow. And did you ever imagine, share what has transpired in this from one little cabin on some land?
Yeah, we had the cabin for about a year. We just really loved this cabin. Really, I viewed it as like my church, my shrine. And then I ended up getting bees. I think we bought it in September. The following spring, I got bees and became a beekeeper, which has been a journey. And then it turns out that the woman who lived next door, who owned the cabin and who sold me the cabin, she loved that I loved this cabin so much because it was when she owned it, it was where her heart was, but she needed to sell it for different reasons. And it meant a lot to her that I felt this connection to this cabin. And so what happened was she then wanted to sell her house, which is next to the cabin. And she asked me if I wanted to buy it. And I didn't really want a house. I've already talked about how I'm not good at taking care of properties. We didn't need this kind of responsibility, but it was a great opportunity because the land to this house is in front of the cabin. And I thought, well, if somebody else moves into this house, my shrine where it's peaceful, who knows? Maybe they'll have, as my friend said, maybe they'll open up a motorcycle repair shop. So I'm like, oh my God, I got to buy this house. So I said to my husband, what in the world are we going to do with another house? And he's like, well, we could always sell it. So it's fine. If that's what you want to do, fine. So we bought the second house. Then COVID happened and it was very good that we had this other house because we needed it. And then some adjacent land became available. And this was not super expensive property, but I'm also fortunate to have been at a stage in life where my kids had already been through college. So I was able to do this. Then some adjacent property next to these two properties came available with an off-the-grid cabin on a creek. And so I just immediately bought that when I was made aware of the opportunity. So now we have this compound that is way beyond anything I could ever take care of. So I call them my country club because they're in my club. They help me keep this place going. I have a person who helps me with bees. I have a couple people help me with the property. I have a forester. I had somebody who helped me design it. And then I have an amazing woman who is a landscape architect, and she's studying to become an actual architect. And so we have this really creative partnership. Erin Lawley, she's amazing. And I've just met a bunch of people on this journey. And I'm now working with Kathy Contrino of CW Native Plants, and I source a lot of my plants for the native garden I've planted from her. So what's just been so interesting is I couldn't do this myself. It takes a village. And so I've assembled an amazing team of people that I've learned so much from. And it's been such an interesting departure from the life I had led before, where I've learned about bees, I've learned about trees, I work with a forester, I've learned a lot of things like how to fix things. I have my friend who's the beekeeper, she's from the country, and I'll say, how am I doing on my country skills? Because I've just had to learn a lot of stuff I didn't know how to do before. So I've met a whole different group of people, and I have a whole separate life in the country. It's just amazing.
And that's so fascinating to me because I've been to these cabins, and sometimes I've learned since relocated to central New York, and people say we have a cabin on the lake, and it's a huge house. Like your cabin, it really is a cabin. It's what we picture when we think of Goldilocks and the Three Bears cabin. And what I find fascinating about what you're saying here is that you weren't wanting to acquire more property, which is sort of like we think, success equals more things or more buildings. And what's fascinating to me as I listen to your story is that you are not interested in the property. You're interested in being a caretaker of the land, and you don't want to spend a lot of time and energy on properties, but you're spending all your time and energy on the land and the nature and wilding this land, which is fascinating to me. And I know that you have mentioned to me recently that the bees is really just a part of regenerating and rewilding the land. I'd love to hear more what you're doing in that regard.
Yeah, so I'll just mention something that the Erin, who's my landscape architect, which we talk a lot about land and gardens and the environment. She said it's so interesting that people look for the most beautiful piece of property, and then their focus is like putting a big building or house on it and not featuring the property. So we're very philosophically aligned that it's the beauty of the land. That's what brought me here. This is not about real estate. It's not about square footage. If anything, it's about the opposite of square footage. It's about being in nature in a very simple way. And what I learned with bees is that I had to become so hyper vigilant about understanding weather and temperature and environmental conditions. One of the threats to our environment is less about, oh, we need to have, people would keep saying, oh, you're saving the planet because you have bees. Well, you're not really saving the planet because you have bees. You're saving the planet in a sense if you plant more native plants and shrubs and so forth and replenish our environment with the things that are native to your environment, because that supports more wildlife, it supports more diversity and more pollinators. So I started to get more interested in the supply side, so to speak, of what the bees needed. And that led me to this whole interest in the garden and the beauty of the garden. But then I started to see beauty in a different way, which was beauty with native plants instead of just beautiful plants. So this was like a multi-step unfolding of just getting more simple and more simple and more simple and down to the most elemental aspects of the land. Like, how do we bring it back to native plants? But how do we do that in a way that's artful and beautiful? And Erin told me about Pete Outhoff, who is this amazing landscape gardener from Europe, and he designed the High Line and all these places. So I'm very inspired by that kind of style of planting that's very artistic and very beautiful, but is essentially painting with native plants.
I love that. My husband is a gardener, and we watched a film called The Biggest Little Farm. I don't know if you've seen that. It's an incredible film about this couple who bought a dusty old almond farm outside of LA and turned it into this incredible biodiversity farm. And that inspired my husband to rip up all the ivy in our front lawn and plant fruit trees in our former home. And now he puts in plants. Now he's learning Central New York plants, because now we're no longer in California, we're in Central New York, and he has a plant that the monarch butterflies dance in front of when they come, this big purple plant that they do this monarch butterfly dance, this happy dance. And then they fly around him like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And that makes me think of your TED Talk where you were talking about people being data scientists and tracking the monarch butterflies. And that's a talk that you were giving when we were working together. I'm curious about this intersection of technology and nature. Like you said, you live this dual life. So you're advising AI companies, you're teaching people in AI, and yet you're bringing in native plants and spending time in nature. I'm curious just how you find those worlds colliding and what your thoughts are about this kind of new future state that we're going towards with AI and this back to land state. How do you reconcile those?
So it is just crazy that in 2016, I did a TED Talk and the topic was on citizen data science. I mean, that is crazy because I forgot that I did that, and now I'm actually living it. And so, for example, I was part of a citizen science experiment for NASA last year during the total eclipse because we were in totality in Buffalo, and I actually collected data on the beehives. But that's another story. It's on my website. So my talk back in 2016 was about the power that we all have as individuals to use our technology, our phones at the time is what I talked about, to record sightings, to participate in crowdsourced experiments, to whether it's to help count penguins in Antarctica, which was really just training machine learning models, it turns out at the time, but we weren't commonly talking about machine learning, or whether to help solve these gamification sites online to help construct proteins to cure cancer, whatever. There was a series of experiments and ways you could participate by just like observing how many butterflies you saw in your region, on what date, at what time, and what location. And these are things from like eBird and Cornell. They're very popular now, citizen science websites. So the intersection to me is the empowering sense that we can actually be part of the greater whole by being advocates and being engaged, like where we are, collect data and help measure how things are going. That we're not powerless. Not only can we plant native plants and have sustainable practices on our land, but we can contribute with data to organizations that are collecting it and using it to help make decisions about the environment. So I just find that all very interesting. So I'm very much an open data person. I'm very much a citizen data person, whether it's about our environment, whether it's about government, whether it's about people being empowered and having access to data to help be advocates in our roles as citizens in the broadest sense.
I think we are entering a phase in our world where we are learning how to partner with technology. And I'm someone who really loves change and disruption and gets energized by it. And of course, I work a lot in technology, so I'm not afraid of technology and what it's going to do. I'm excited about technology and what it's going to enable us as humans to do. So thank you for sharing all of that. I want to go back to the frustration you were feeling with your work and the conversations you and I were having about your career path and how things changed thanks to this cabin that were not sort of your normal career trajectory way of doing things. I wonder if you have thoughts on that for others.
Yes, I think in retrospect, my life was very much a grind in terms of work. I want to be grateful for the opportunity. I certainly have a beautiful family. I have a lot of things that I'm very grateful for. But why I felt squeezed, why I felt claustrophobic was I felt I was doing things for everybody else, but not for me. I believed, like I think many women, and it's not exclusively women, but I think women in particular have believed that if we really work hard and we really deliver and we just keep working harder, that we will be rewarded. And I kept working harder and I kept doing more and I was rewarded, but I wasn't rewarded to the degree that I was working harder. Those benefits accrue to the people above you. And I think I had a naivete that those benefits would accrue proportionately to me, but that's just not how the world works. So that actually was my naivete at the time. And we talked a lot about that in those years about it's not always about working harder. It's sometimes about stepping back. When I ultimately left and spent more time in the woods, I spent more time really thinking about where do I make a difference? Where is my energy better spent? Where am I wasting energy? What am I doing that I don't need to be doing? And in retrospect, I kind of like audit my life and I think like, what in the world was I doing? Why did I think I had to be on all of those committees? Why did I think I needed to do all this extra work? I just see that I way overdid it. somebody that's been very influential in my life. I've read a lot of Robert Greene's work. I don't know if you ever read Robert Greene. People get him wrong, and I watch his videos. He wrote this book, The Laws of Power, the 48 Laws of Power, and people think, oh, he's trying to teach you to be Machiavellian. And then I actually watched his video about Machiavelli last night. His whole point is to be more realistic about the world that you're in, the way that the games are played, and to be more strategic about how you engage. And I found that really liberating and fascinating because and it's really fun running my business now because I have to strategize every single day. Like I'm signing a contract right now. And so I had to move this a little bit because I had to talk to my lawyer. And there's a lot of liberation when you accept that people are out for themselves. And once you accept that, then it changes like how you play in the world. So I'm much more realistic now about how things operate and much less naive. And that has freed me to play harder, play a more hardball, and not be so quote unquote nice, and not agree to do everything, and have more boundaries and enforce more control over my environment. And it's really been a fascinating journey. I just live in a very different way now, but I still learn every day. I really recommend people to check out some of Robert's videos and books, but you have to come at it from an intellectual standpoint because he's not trying to teach you. People take it wrong. He's not telling you to do things that are immoral. He's trying to tell you that this is how the world operates. So just be aware that this is how the world operates and play accordingly. And it's been really fun. It's like, to your point about the world is changing, there's technology, disruption, change. You have to adapt every day. And it's a real sense of feeling alive to be engaged in the world. And being in my cabin, like being in the woods, but talking to people all over the world about AI and traveling around. And I'm just much more strategic about what I choose to do.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when I talk to people, there's a lot of upheaval going on. There's a lot of change going on. And that can create a sense of fear. That can create a sense of overwhelm. And I get this idea that people are trying to get their ducks in a row. They're trying to achieve some sense of normalcy. And I don't think that's the right direction. I think embracing the kind of chaotic change that we're in may be more the direction we're going than trying to get back to some state of normalcy. I'm curious of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, there is no normalcy. It's fortunate that one of my life strategies turned out to be a smart strategy. I didn't know it at the time, which was to be under invested. It was smart and it was not smart. You could argue both. But I think it's kind of better to have a lighter footprint, to have lower fixed costs, to have more optionality, and to invest in relationships, invest to have more freedom. Although I earned a good salary and we paid for kids' college, we never had huge fixed costs. So because I'm kind of claustrophobic, I don't like the idea of being trapped and having big bills to pay. So I think in this kind of time where there's so much disruption, the less that you've got to worry about having big fixed costs. I'm hanging out in this little cabin. It costs practically nothing. Not having excess baggage gives you freedom to move in different ways. So I think that the normalcy is having a minimum, we talk about minimum viable product in Agile. What's your minimum viable state of contentment? Like, what do you need to stay in a healthful life? What kind of footprint do you need? What kind of environment do you need that allows you to feel comfortable but not saddled with a massive expense base so that you can be more nimble? Because I don't know what kind of change we're going to face, but I know that being more free, not to have a lot of fixed expenses, is probably one of the biggest advantages anybody could have. that's not an actionable strategy for many people at this point if you're already like weighed down with things. But I would just say that there's not going to be a time where life will be more normal. I don't see that coming.
Right. And in terms of, you mentioned earlier about this community, and I know that you're wanting to host people to come and be on your property. Do you see that as a future path, that we're more in community, we're less in our little bubbles or silos in our own individual places? My sister who passed away, she and I always used to talk about the tiny house village and the family compound, this idea of beyond family, but this idea of probably something from the 60s, but revamped, where we actually all have our own little space and different philosophies of life. But this idea of not doing things alone, not feeling like we have to be isolated, but really finding more of a community approach. Is that what you're leaning towards with your vision?
Yes, it's ironic. I have 3 kids. They're adult kids in their 20s and one's early 30s. They all live here now. And we're not natives. They were born here, but
Oh, wow.
which is amazing. And my second daughter's boyfriend moved here yesterday from New York, and his family may be moving here. So what?
Because they went off to the big cities, right? I said I would never come back to Central New York in a million years. And now we're so happy here. It's a different kind of energy. So your kids went off to the big cities and have already come back.
Yes, some of them went off, some of them didn't. But yeah, so I think that I sense this feeling that people want to be around family, extended family, friends. We used to be a society where people just picked up and moved places. That was like what my childhood was like. And that was the way the economy was then. I think now people can work remotely and there's more flexibility, but also I think you can't find certainty in a job in the external world with all of the change happening in the economy and with technology, but you can tighten your circle of trust, your friends, your family. That's where I'm investing, if you will. I'm just very grateful to have my family and my friends nearby. I think that is the future, and that looks different for different people depending on what your circle is, whether it's your friends and it's a tiny house village, or it's families like moving in together, or I think we're kind of going back to grandparents, great-grandparents kind of behavior.
Yeah, and I've had to shepherd people through the aging process and the dying process and going into these homes, which I just am not a huge fan of. I just want to create a place where people can come and graciously depart this earth in a whole different way. I have 5 different businesses I would love to open that are different than my day-to-day work. That being one of them. Like, I would just love a more nature-based, less interventionist kind of path to the end for the people that I love, certainly for myself. I'm like, plant me under a tree, I'll be good. But yeah, I feel that too. I feel that people are looking for more of a sense of connection and community, whether that be family, or maybe there's a new term for not family, but kind of family-like community.
Right.
I'm definitely sensing that.
Yeah, I was reading, this is probably about a year and a half ago when AI was really exploding, and we were just kind of at the beginning of this being like everybody talking about it. And whoever this person was, they said, this is a time to really buckle down like with your tribe. I thought that was interesting. And that's come to pass, I think. I mean, that's certainly like what's happened in my life, but both like what I've chosen to do and what those around me have chosen to do.
So there's tribe, but there's also location, geography. I sense people are trying to figure out where's their place. It was during COVID that I started getting on Zillow and looking in the central New York area, just feeling like, I don't know if the Bay Area is my place anymore. And it started feeling less and less like my place. And the more I would come back and visit family here with the greenery and the lush and the lakes and the waterfalls, it was nourishing to me. I am a believer that when we find our place, that's when we find our tribe and our community, or our right work starts coming forward. Like, clearly you were already living in it. You didn't have to go somewhere else. I'm wondering what you feel about that, or maybe that's also what your kids are experiencing, or if you've seen that with other people, where it's like finding the place is the kind of the precursor to things unfolding.
Yes, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think that you have to feel like you're at home to be free to explore. It's hard because I'm watching my kids and it's which step do they take? And the one daughter just said, I'm just coming here. And then like things unfold from there. So I think, yes, I think deciding on your place and putting a lot of thought into what serves you, what kind of environment serves you, what feels like home to you. And that's different for everybody. But I felt like once I had this land, I could just be more relaxed and spend more time just thinking about things. And it gave me mental space and everything just happened from there. And I'm seeing that with other people that I know, making decisions to go home. People are going home, or their families are and friends are getting together. So I think you have to feel safe and you have to feel supported and comfortable to take the risks that we're going to need to take with this much change. So I think that idea of place is, where do you feel safe and supported? Because the world isn't going to provide that for you, and you're going to have to be in a chaotic world. How can you feel safe and supported so that you can have the energy and the courage to be in part of this very disruptive world?
So, like a foundational base to navigate from.
Yeah, I mean, that's important to me. It's interesting that you mentioned it. If this is a trend or if this is going to become more important.
You said earlier that you were seeking healing. Have you found that?
Yes, I think so. It's funny, I'm looking out my window right now and there's a groundhog sitting up, just walking around. I am more comfortable living in the pace of nature, and we've had this conversation, which is kind of slow and then abrupt change and then act and then slow. So I just feel like when I am looking out in the woods or like walking in the woods, that just feels very like where we should be. It feels very natural. And I feel like it's like a meditative space that I feel I'm in. And when I go back to our suburban house, I feel like, okay, now life, errands, stuff, we're doing things. And that's more of a place of activity. This is more of a place of a restorative kind of place. It's been important to me to have the space and the time and to feel okay about allowing myself the space and time to rest and eat well and exercise. It takes real time. And women in particular, especially women taking care of families, whatever that might look like, or women like taking care of things in the workplace, we always put ourselves last. And so I couldn't possibly have healed myself when I was last in line for my own attention. That's my experience. To take more risk, to set yourself up to be able to take more risk. So whether that's surrounding yourself with your family, friends, by doing that, by creating a feeling of support, I've been able to take more risk, which I think is just how we're going to have to live in such a completely unpredictable time. I think that for most of my life, I made good choices, but they were safe choices. I'm glad to be able to live on the edge a bit more. So I would encourage people to do that, but I'm also very practical, and I didn't do it until I knew that the downside risk was low. I just want to be honest that like my story is practical in that I set my life up to be able to take risk. So the more you can do that, getting a good support network by keeping your expenses low, you're more flexible to move in this world. And it can be very rewarding. A scary time can be rewarding if you're able to pivot.
Yeah. And what's interesting to me is that, again, that feels intuitive to me, that you set up a life where you didn't have the big house and you didn't have the fancy things, right? But you didn't know why. Like, you knew you didn't want to be encumbered, but you didn't know where it was taking you. It was, I think at the time when we were talking about it, it was more like, well, we want to be able to be flexible to travel, or it was more like setting yourself up for retirement, not setting yourself up to rewild the planet.
Yeah, I think that I've always had a very strong instinct that while my life looked very conventional on the outside, I've always had a very strong instinct that I do not want to be owned. I do not want to be controlled. I do not want my destiny in other people's hands. So while I looked like I was living a very conventional life, showing up to work at a bank every day, I was also rebelling against that by other things I was setting up in my life to enable me to take a different path. So I think that rebellious nature that I had allowed me to create different off-ramps and on-ramps that have been really interesting. It must have instinctively set myself up to be able to take a lot of risk by the way I structured my life. But I didn't have it all mapped out.
You didn't have this as a vision
No.
of being a part of a program and consulting to AI
No,
folks.
no.
That didn't exist at the time
Right.
anyway.
But I think, optionality. I'm big on optionality. You've got to be able to be flexible and nimble because the rug's going to be pulled out from under you tomorrow.
This has been a fascinating conversation, and I'm so grateful that you joined us today. Where can we find you? Where do you have a website?
Yeah, so I have a website, AllisonSagraves.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram under my name, and also Applied Serendipity, which is kind of my tagline. That's probably the best places to find me.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing your applied serendipity with us today, because it's so in line with the surrendering to the signs theme of the podcast. And we'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Surrendering to the Signs. I hope you found it inspiring. Please like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Also, feel free to hop on over to surrenderingtothesigns.com, where you can download our free e-guide with examples and your own workbook to help you identify your signs. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode and wish you well.
Heat of the summer over desert land where the sun